Her hands were shaking, cold and chapped, as she held out the leather wallet she'd found in the alley. Inside was more money than she'd seen in a decade, $50,000 in cash. She stood in the marble lobby, determined to return it. What she didn't know was that the security guard checking her tattered ID was about to unlock a secret 15 years buried, connecting her to the millionaire in the penthouse above. This is the true story of Sarah Miller, a woman surviving on the streets of Chicago, and Michael Thorne, a tech CEO whose fortune couldn't fill the emptiness in his penthouse. Two lives shattered by a single choice 15 years ago, now on a collision course because of a simple act of honesty. But when a routine security check unlocks a forgotten past, it will force both of them to answer one agonizing question. What happens when the person you loved most is the one you failed completely? 15 years before that wallet was found, Sarah and Michael were just two students at Northwestern University, deeply in love and dreaming of a shared future. He was a brilliant computer science major. She was a talented artist. For 3 years, they were inseparable. Then, in their senior year, Michael landed a once-in-a-lifetime internship with a Silicon Valley startup. He begged Sarah to come with him, but she had just been accepted into a prestigious, unpaid art residency in Chicago, a final step to launch her career. They made a promise, 1 year apart to chase their dreams, then forever together. He boarded the plane to California. She never saw him again. The startup exploded into a billion-dollar unicorn. Michael Thorne became a tech titan, a symbol of ruthless ambition. He told himself the silence was mutual, that she had moved on. He buried the memory of her under layers of corporate strategy and staggering wealth. But in a cramped studio apartment in Chicago, Sarah waited. She completed her residency, checked her mailbox every day, and kept her phone charged long after his number stopped working. Then the letters started coming back, marked, "Return to sender." The man she loved had vanished into his new world, leaving no forwarding address. What Michael never knew, what he had left behind, was a positive pregnancy test. Sarah discovered it 2 months after he left. Terrified and alone, she faced an impossible choice. She chose the child. She gave up her art career to work 2, then 3 minimum-wage jobs as a diner waitress, a retail clerk, a late-night cleaner in office buildings like the one Michael would eventually own. She named her daughter Chloe. For years, she was a statistic, one of the nearly 80% of homeless women whose journey began with a traumatic event, often a relationship rupture. In her case, it was abandonment. The descent was slow, then catastrophic. A predatory landlord, a missed rent payment, an eviction. She and Chloe lived in her car, then in shelters when the car was repossessed. Through it all, Sarah maintained a staggering moral code. Researchers call it the honesty paradox. Studies across 40 countries show that people in poverty are often more likely to return lost valuables, driven by a fierce need to hold onto their self-respect. Sarah lived this truth every day. She taught Chloe that their character was the one thing no one could take from them. Meanwhile, in his glass tower, Michael Thorne's empire was built on data, but he was blind to the human algorithm right in front of him. His life was a series of calculated mergers and acquisitions. His personal relationships were transactional, most notably with his ambitious fiancée, Evelyn Reed. Evelyn, a corporate attorney, viewed Michael's company as her ultimate prize. Unbeknownst to Michael, she had been secretly collaborating with his jealous business partner, forging documents to declare Michael mentally unfit in order to seize control of the board. The trap was set to spring in just 72 hours. On a bitterly cold Chicago morning, these two parallel lines of fate began to bend toward each other. Sarah was searching for recyclables in an alley behind a luxury high-rise when she saw it, a slim, black alligator leather wallet, half buried in slush. Inside was a driver's license for Michael Thorne, 3 platinum credit cards, and a thick bundle of $100 bills, $50,000. It was more money than she had touched in a lifetime. For a long minute, she stared at it, the cold seeping through her worn coat. Then, thinking of the lesson she had to teach Chloe, she zipped the wallet into her inner pocket and began the long walk to the address on the license, the Thorne Technologies headquarters. She entered a lobby of chilled marble and silent judgment. Approaching the security desk, her voice was quiet but steady. "I need to return this. I found it." The guard, a man named Carl, eyed her with routine skepticism. Protocol demanded he verify the finder's identity before releasing property to the executive suite. "I'll need to see some ID, ma'am," he said, his tone bored. Sarah handed over her only form of identification, a tattered, stay-tissued photo ID from 4 years prior, from an address that no longer existed. Carl scanned it into the visitor system. The software did its job, cross-referencing the name with internal databases. But what flashed on Carl's screen wasn't a simple visitor log. It was a high-priority, 15-year-old administrative flag, placed by Michael Thorne himself in the company's earliest days, a desperate, forgotten search parameter for a name he thought he'd erased from history: Sarah Miller. The system triggered an immediate, silent alert directly to the CEO's private phone. Down in the lobby, Carl's demeanor changed instantly. His eyes widened. He looked from the photo on the screen to the weathered woman before him and back again. He picked up his desk phone, his finger hovering over the direct line to the penthouse. And in that suspended second, Sarah had no idea that the act of returning a stranger's wallet was about to reintroduce her to the man who had broken her heart and reveal a truth that would shatter his perfectly constructed world. The phone on Michael Thorne's desk emitted a soft, urgent chime, a sound reserved for system-wide alerts. He was in the middle of reviewing the fraudulent psychiatric report his fiancée had commissioned, his stomach a knot of cold fury. He almost ignored it, but the alert header made his blood freeze. Match: Sarah Miller, visitor lobby. For 15 years, that name had been a ghost in his machine, a dormant line of code he couldn't bring himself to delete. He stared, uncomprehending. It was impossible, a glitch, a cruel joke. Then security feed footage popped up on his monitor, showing a grainy image of the lobby desk. And there she was, older, worn thin by life, her dark hair streaked with gray, but undeniably her, Sarah, holding his wallet. The world narrowed to a single, screaming point of static. All his meticulously planned countermoves against Evelyn evaporated. Without a word to his panicked assistant, he left his office and entered the private elevator, descending 40 floors in a silence that roared in his ears. His mind flashed to the research he'd once skimmed, the Lost Love project that claimed 72% of reconnected former sweethearts married. His cynical brain had dismissed it as sentimental nonsense. Now, faced with the statistical anomaly of her existence, he felt physically ill. Down in the lobby, Sarah shifted her weight, the marble floor unforgiving on her feet. The security guard, Carl, had hung up the phone and was now watching her with an unnerving intensity. "Mr. Thorne is on his way down personally, ma'am," he said, his voice oddly formal. Sarah simply nodded, assuming the billionaire wanted to thank the honest, homeless woman himself. She braced for a handshake, maybe a photo for a press release about corporate charity. She did not brace for the elevator doors to open, and for the man who stepped out to be the living echo of every painful dream she'd had for a decade and a half. Michael Thorne emerged, but he wasn't the polished CEO. He was pale, his perfectly tailored suit seeming to hang on him suddenly. His eyes, the same shade of hazel she remembered, locked onto hers from across the lobby. There was no smile of gratitude. There was only shock, a raw and unguarded recognition that shattered the professional distance of the space. He took a few steps forward, then stopped, as if hitting an invisible wall. Sarah, the name was a breath, not a word. Hearing her name in his voice after 15 years was a physical blow. The lobby, the guards, the money in the wallet, it all dissolved. She was 22 again, standing at an airport gate, watching him walk away. A small, broken sound escaped her. She took an involuntary step back. Michael, the wallet felt like a lead weight in her hand. The elegant, terrifying truth clicked into place. The Michael Thorne of the news headlines, the tech baron, was her Michael. The one who never called, never wrote, never came back. He closed the distance then, his focus solely on her. You found my wallet?" he asked, the question absurd in its simplicity given the cataclysm happening between them. "I was returning it," she managed, her voice barely audible. She thrust it toward him, a desperate gesture to complete the transaction and flee. He took it automatically, his fingers brushing hers. The contact was electric, a current that carried 15 years of silence and unanswered letters. "Why are you here?" he asked, a deeper question lurking beneath the words. "Why are you in my lobby? Why are you back in my life? Why do you look so tired?" Sarah's pride, hardened by years of survival, flared. "You mean why am I in Chicago, or why am I like this?" She gestured vaguely at her worn coat. "Life happened, Michael. You left. It kept going." Every word was a shard of glass. He flinched. The The corporate predator who terrified boardrooms was utterly disarmed. "I looked for you," he lied, the old, cowardly excuse forming on his lips. But then he looked at her, really looked. He saw the frayed seams of her sleeves, the resoled boots, the profound exhaustion in her eyes that no amount of sleep could fix. This wasn't a woman who had moved on to a modest life. This was a woman who had been fighting a war. "Sir," Carl interjected cautiously, holding up her tattered ID, the system. It flagged her from an old search protocol. Michael's head snapped toward him. The old search. He'd installed it in a fit of drunken remorse after the company's first big funding round, a hollow gesture he never thought would yield a result. The fact that it had just triggered meant one thing. Her official address, the one on that ID, was years out of date. The system couldn't find a current one. She had fallen off the grid. The reality of her situation, of what life happened truly meant, began to dawn on him with horrific clarity. Before he could form another sentence, his personal phone vibrated. Evelyn. The name on the screen was a splash of cold water. The trap. The takeover. In his shock over Sarah, he had forgotten he was standing in the middle of a different battlefield. He rejected the call, but the timing was a brutal reminder. He had minutes, maybe hours, before Evelyn made her move. And now Sarah was here, a living ghost from a past he'd betrayed, presenting a crisis that demanded a completely different part of his soul. He made a decision. It was impulsive, emotional, and utterly unlike him. "Come upstairs," he said, his voice leaving no room for refusal. "Please." Sarah shook her head, a panic rising in her throat. This was too much, too fast. "I returned your property. We are done." "We are not done," he said, the intensity startling both her and the guards. He lowered his voice, leaning in. "Sarah, please, just for a moment. There's something happening. I need to talk to you, not as who we were, just as people. Please." The please again, so uncharacteristically pleading, broke her resolve. Numbly, she nodded. The elevator ride to the penthouse was a silent, pressurized chamber. He stood stiffly, staring at the ascending numbers. She stared at her reflection in the polished doors, a stark contrast to the man beside her in his $5,000 suit. She was walking into the heart of the empire built in the years he was absent from her life. The doors opened directly into his private office, a minimalist space of glass, steel, and breathtaking views of the city she'd been sleeping beneath. He led her to a sitting area, but she remained standing, poised for flight. "Tell me what happened," he said, bypassing all small talk. "After I left." Sarah let out a short, humorless laugh. "You want my biography? The condensed version is I had your child, you disappeared, and it didn't go well." The air was sucked from the room. Michael actually staggered, gripping the back of a chair for support. "What?" The word was a gasp. "A child, a daughter," Sarah said, watching the color drain from his face. "Her name is Chloe, she's 14. She delivered the facts like stones, dropping them one by one into the still pond of his ignorance, watching the ripples of shock and dawning horror distort his features. The numbers flashed in his mind. 14, conceived just before he left, born while he was building his first prototype, a whole human being, a teenage daughter existing in the world while he was obsessing over market share. The psychic weight of his failure collapsed onto him. This wasn't just abandoning a lover, this was abandoning a family. The ethical failure was absolute. "Why didn't you find me? Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded, a defensive anger rising to mask the shame. Sarah's own anger, banked for years, finally ignited. "Find you? I wrote to your parents' house. The letters came back. I called your old number for a year. You changed everything. You erased yourself from my world. What was I supposed to do, hire a private investigator with my diner tips?" She took a step toward him, her eyes blazing. "You made a choice, Michael. You chose the startup, the money, the future. I was part of the past you deleted. I just didn't know I was taking our daughter with me into the trash." Her words were a direct hit. He had no defense. The elegant narrative of his success, the brilliant, self-made man, crumbled, revealing a foundation of moral cowardice. He saw it now, the unpaid internship that became a career, the frantic pace he used as an excuse, the deliberate shutting down of that chapter of his life because the guilt was too heavy to carry. He had not just forgotten her, he had actively buried her. At that moment, his executive assistant's voice came over the intercom, strained. "Mr. Thorne, Ms. Reed is here. She's insisting on seeing you immediately. She says it's regarding the board emergency." Evelyn, she was early. The corporate coup was kicking into its final phase. Michael looked from the intercom to Sarah, who was watching him with a newfound understanding. She heard the tension in the assistant's voice. "Trouble in paradise?" she asked, her tone flat. He had two collapsing worlds in one room, the past he'd failed and the present that was trying to destroy him. He made another snap decision. He pressed the intercom. "Tell her I'm in a private meeting, she can wait." It was a declaration of war. Hanging up, he turned back to Sarah. "I have to handle this, but you are not leaving this building, not until we talk. Not until he trailed off, unable to articulate the enormity of what he needed to do. "My driver will take you anywhere you need to go. Tell me where Chloe is. Is she safe?" The concern in his voice, so long absent, was a strange and painful thing for Sarah to hear. She hesitated. Her daughter was at the public library, their agreed-upon safe spot for the day. Revealing that felt like giving him a piece of them, a piece she'd guarded fiercely. But the practical, maternal part of her brain calculated. A safe ride in a warm car. Maybe, just maybe, a thread of responsibility in this reckless man. "The Harold Washington Library," she said quietly. "She'll be there until 5. Michael immediately called his most trusted driver, giving explicit, urgent instructions. As Sarah was escorted back to the private elevator, she turned at the last second. "Why did you have the system flag my name, Michael? If you wanted to forget me, why did you leave a trail to find me?" He had no honest answer. Before he could form one, the doors closed, leaving him alone with the ticking time bomb of Evelyn's ambition and the seismic truth that he was a father. He had just sent a stranger to pick up his daughter, and the woman who wanted to ruin him was packing outside his door, unaware that his entire universe had already been overturned. Michael took one steadying breath, straightened his tie, and walked to his office door to face the woman who wanted to destroy him. He opened it to find Evelyn Reed, a vision of calculated elegance, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "Darling, you've been ignoring my calls," she purred, sweeping past him into the office, her lawyer a silent shadow behind her. "We have a board crisis. Your erratic behavior this week has everyone concerned. It's time to sign the temporary stewardship agreement for the company's good." Michael didn't sit. He leaned against his desk, a picture of relaxed control, a mask he'd perfected. Erratic behavior, like reviewing financials and discovering several unauthorized transfers to a legal firm in Zurich. "Your firm, Evelyn." Her smile faltered for a millisecond. He had her first move. He continued, his voice calm. "Or like receiving a full dossier on Dr. Alvin Finch, the psychiatrist whose signature is on my competency evaluation. A man who lost his license for perjury 5 years ago in another state. You bought a forged document. That's not just a coup, that's fraud." Evelyn's composure cracked. She hadn't expected him to be this prepared. Her lawyer shifted nervously. "This is slander," Evelyn spat. "The board will hear about this obstruction." "They already have," Michael said, picking up a remote. A screen on the wall lit up, showing a live, concluded video conference with his 3 most powerful board members. They had seen and heard everything. One of them gave a slight nod to Michael. Evelyn's face went bone white. Her entire plan, built on the assumption he was distracted and defenseless, had just imploded in 30 seconds. "Get out of my company," Michael said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Your engagement is over. Your shares will be bought out at yesterday's price before you started tanking them with your rumors. If you fight it, I release the Finch file to the SEC and the press. You'll never practice law again." It was a brutal, total victory. Evelyn, defeated and seething, turned and left without another word, her grand ambition reduced to ash. Michael had won the corporate war. And he felt nothing, no triumph, only a hollow emptiness, because waiting downstairs in his car was a consequence no amount of money could settle. Across town, the black sedan pulled up to the historic library. Sarah, her heart pounding, saw Chloe through the giant window, curled in a chair with a stack of books. Her daughter, 14, with Michael's thoughtful brow and Sarah's defiant eyes. Sarah stepped out of the car just as Chloe, sensing her, looked up. The girl's face lit up, then shifted to confusion at the luxurious car and her mother's agitated state. Chloe gathered her backpack and came outside. "Mom, what's going on? Are you okay?" Before Sarah could answer, the driver, an older man named Henry following strict orders, said, "Miss Miller, your father has asked that I bring you both to a secure location." The word father hung in the cold air. Chloe's eyes went wide. "My what?" Sarah closed her eyes, the moment she dreaded and rehearsed for years arriving in the worst possible way. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Get in the car, I'll explain." The explanation in the quiet backseat was the barest of skeletons. His name is Michael Thorne. We were in love a long time ago. He didn't know about you. I found something of his today and returned it. That's how we reconnected. Chloe, a smart, introverted teenager who'd grown up too fast, processed this with a scary calm. The tech guy, the billionaire? Sarah nodded. Chloe looked out the window at the gleaming skyline, the world of her father. And he wants to see me now? Why? Sarah had no good answer. I don't know. Henry drove them not to the corporate tower, but to the private garage of a sleek, secure residential building, one of Michael's properties. He ushered them up to a pristine, empty condominium, all neutral tones and floor-to-ceiling windows. Mr. Thorne will be here shortly. He asked that you make yourselves comfortable, Henry said, before leaving them in the silent, opulent space. It felt like a museum. Chloe walked to the window, touching the cold glass. He lives like this. She whispered, the disparity between this and the shelter they'd slept in last week too vast to comprehend. Back in his office, Michael was finally alone. The adrenaline of defeating Evelyn drained away, leaving only the raw, gutting truth of Sarah and Chloe. He accessed the driver's tracker, saw they were safe at the condo, and then did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He searched for Sarah Miller in public databases. Not the old, sentimental search, but a cold, financial and legal trace. What he found was a map of ruin, eviction filings, a dismissed bankruptcy case from 8 years prior. A string of addresses in the city's poorest zip codes, then nothing. She had become part of the statistic he'd read about, the nearly 60% of people experiencing homelessness who have a job but still can't afford housing. She had worked, and it hadn't mattered. The system had swallowed her, and he had been too busy building his own to notice. His phone rang. It was Henry, the driver, calling from the car after dropping them off. His voice was low, uneasy. "Sir, the young girl, Chloe, she asked me a question on the ride. She asked if you were a good man." Michael's breath caught. "What did you say?" There was a long pause. "I said I didn't know, sir. I've driven you for 5 years. I know your schedule, your meetings. I didn't know you had a daughter." The quiet judgment in his most loyal employee's voice was more devastating than Evelyn's screaming fit. He was a stranger to his own life. He left the tower, directing his own car this time. On the way, he passed the alley where Sarah had found his wallet. He slowed, looking at the dumpster, the grimy pavement. This was the distance between his world and hers, a distance he had created. He arrived at the condo, his key feeling alien in the lock. He pushed the door open. Sarah and Chloe were sitting together on the vast, white sofa, a small island in a sea of polished concrete. They looked up, identical expressions of wary apprehension on their faces. The silence was absolute. Michael stood there, a billionaire on the threshold of his own empty property, facing the two people who were his greatest failure. He looked at Chloe, really looked. He saw his mother's chin, his own hairline, but he also saw a steadiness, a quiet, observant quality that was entirely her own. "Hello, Chloe," he said, his voice gravelly. "I'm Michael." She didn't smile, she studied him. "Are you a good man?" she asked, repeating the question she'd asked the driver. It was the only question that mattered. He had no prepared speech, no corporate spin. "No," he answered honestly, the word tearing out of him. I have been a very successful man, and a very selfish one. I made a mistake, a terrible, cowardly mistake with your mother, and because of that I missed your entire life. There is no excuse. I am so sorry. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough, but it was true." Chloe glanced at her mother, then back at him. "Mom says you didn't know about me." "I didn't," he said, "but that's my fault too. I made it impossible for her to tell me. I ran away and hid in my work." Sarah watched this exchange, her arms wrapped tightly around herself, protecting a heart that had been broken for so long it had healed crooked. Then Chloe asked the practical, devastating question of the poor. "So what happens now? Do we have to leave?" The assumption that this safety was temporary, that they would be cast back out, shattered Michael. "No," he said, too forcefully. "No, you never have to leave anywhere unsafe again. This place is yours, whatever you need, anything." It was the promise of a man trying to buy redemption, and they all heard the hollow ring of it. Sarah finally spoke, her voice tired. "We don't want your condo, Michael. We don't want a paycheck. You can't fix 15 years with a key." "Then what do you want?" he pleaded, desperate for a task, a problem he could solve. Sarah looked at her daughter, then back at him, her eyes filled with a grief that had matured into a fierce, unyielding love. "I want you to know her. I want you to be a father if you can figure out how. And I want to not be so tired anymore." It was a request for a relationship, not a transaction. It was the one thing his money and power couldn't instantly engineer. He nodded, overwhelmed. At that moment, his phone buzzed again. It was a notification from a private security feed he'd forgotten about, the one at his penthouse. He absently opened it. The live feed showed Evelyn Reed using her old key, letting herself into his personal home. She wasn't going to the police or the board. She was going for something else. Something personal. And as he watched, she walked not to his office, but to his bedroom and began opening drawers, her face a mask of furious, vengeful purpose. She hadn't given up. She had just changed the battlefield from the boardroom to his private life, and she was now alone and unmonitored in the place that held every remaining secret he thought was safe. Michael's blood ran cold as he watched the live feed of Evelyn ransacking his bedroom. She wasn't looking for financial documents. She was tearing through his personal drawers, his closet, under the bed. She was hunting for ammunition of a different kind, something to wound him personally, to smear him publicly, and she would find it. In a locked box at the back of his closet, a box he hadn't opened in over a decade, were every letter Sarah had sent to his old address that had been forwarded on by his confused mother before he changed everything. Letters he had received and never opened, too cowardly to face the pain inside. Proof that he had known, or at least could have known. He shoved the phone into his pocket, his mind racing. "I have to go. There's an emergency at my apartment," he said, the lie brittle. Sarah saw the real fear in his eyes. "What kind of emergency?" He didn't answer, already heading for the door. "Stay here. The security system is armed. Don't open the door for anyone but me or Henry." And then he was gone, leaving Sarah and Chloe alone again in the silent, expensive room. In the speeding car, Michael called building security at his penthouse, ordering them to detain Evelyn for trespassing. But he knew they'd be too slow. She used a valid key. She'd be in and out before they even reached the private elevator. His only hope was to get there first. He screeched into the underground garage, took the elevator up, and burst into his home just as Evelyn was striding out of the bedroom, triumph glittering in her eyes. In her hand was not the box of letters, but something else, a small velvet jewelry case. She held it up. Looking for this, she opened it. Inside was a simple, modest engagement ring from 15 years ago. He'd bought it with his first internship paycheck, a promise to Sarah he never kept. He'd kept it as a perverse trophy of his escape. Evelyn's face was twisted with vindictive glee. "You pathetic cliché. You've been pinning over some waitress all this time. Is that her, the homeless woman in your lobby?" She had connected the dots with terrifying speed. "This will make a beautiful story for the press. The emotionally unstable CEO, haunted by a lost love, unfit to lead. It's even better than the forged psychiatric report." This was her new plan, a character assassination using his one moment of buried decency against him. Michael felt a strange calm settle over him. The fear was gone. He was no longer protecting a secret. The secret was out. "Put it down, Evelyn," he said, his voice quiet. "Or what? You'll sue me. I'm already ruined professionally thanks to you. I have nothing left to lose, but I can make sure you lose everything emotionally. I'll tell the world you abandoned a pregnant woman. How will your precious daughter feel about that?" She had aimed for the one spot his armor didn't cover. Chloe, rage pure and protective, ignited in him, but he didn't move. He did something smarter. He took out his phone, opened a voice recording app, and showed her it was running. "Say it again, Evelyn, for the record. Tell me how you plan to use my past to hurt my daughter." It was a bluff. It had just started recording, but she didn't know that. Her confidence flickered. Blackmail was one thing, evidence of blackmail was another. At that moment, 2 security guards finally arrived. "Escort Ms. Reed from the premises," Michael said, not taking his eyes off her. "And take that from her." He pointed to the ring box. A guard gently pried it from her clenched fingers. Evelyn, outmaneuvered again, shot him a look of pure hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed. "It is," Michael said, and as they led her away, he knew it was true. Her power was broken. He stood alone in the wreckage of his living room, holding the cheap velvet box. He opened it, staring at the ring he'd been too immature to give. The weight of his parallel lives, the billionaire and the boy who loved an artist, collapsed into a single, unbearable point of regret. He couldn't buy back time. He couldn't erase the struggle, but he could choose what to do next. He didn't go back to the office. He went to a small, family-owned jewelry store that had just opened for the day. Meanwhile, Sarah and Chloe waited. The condo felt less like a prison and more like a limbo. Chloe, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. "He's scared of that woman. He's not just rich, he's in trouble." Sarah nodded. It seems that way. Are we in trouble now too? Chloe asked, the perennial fear of the unstable life showing itself. Sarah hugged her. I won't let that happen. But she wasn't sure she could stop it. 2 hours later, Michael returned to the condo. He looked drained but resolute. He didn't offer excuses. He simply said, the immediate threat is handled. She won't be bothering us again. Then he turned to Sarah. Can we talk, alone for a moment? Chloe, with a wisdom beyond her years, simply picked up a book and walked to the far window, giving them space. Michael led Sarah to the kitchen area. He placed the old velvet box on the counter between them. I kept this, he said, his voice raw. I don't know why, as a punishment maybe, a reminder of the person I chose not to be. Sarah stared at it, a ghost from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. I don't want it, Michael. I know, he said. He then placed a second, plain white box beside it. This isn't an engagement ring. It's not a promise of anything because my promises are worthless. He opened it. Inside was a simple, sturdy silver key on a chain. This is the key to a trust. I set it up an hour ago. It's irreversible. It's for Chloe's education, for her future. It has nothing to do with me. It's managed by an independent fiduciary. You control it. You can use it for an apartment, for art supplies, for anything she or you need. No strings. No me involved unless you want me to be. It was the opposite of the condo offer. It wasn't a gift of his space. It was a restoration of her agency. It was practical, respectful, and born of listening to what she'd said. I want to not be so tired anymore. Sarah looked from the key to his face. She saw no manipulation, only a desperate hope to do one thing right. Why? She whispered. Because you returned $50,000 when you had nothing, he said. That's who you are. The least I can do is try to be someone who doesn't just take. He slid the box toward her. You don't have to decide now, but it's there, it's yours. He then picked up the old velvet box. And this, he said, holding the ring between his thumb and forefinger, this belongs to the past. He walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, opened it, and without a moment of drama, dropped the ring. They watched as the tiny sparkle fell 40 stories, disappearing into the city below. It was a gesture, but a powerful one. He was letting the ghost go. Sarah let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The chain of the silver key was cool in her hand. It wasn't love, it wasn't a family, but it was a first step. A foundation. I need time, Michael. We can't just be a family because you feel guilty. I know, he said. I'm asking for a chance to know my daughter, however you'll allow it, however slow it needs to be. At that moment, Chloe walked over. She had seen the key, seen the open window. She looked at Michael. Did you throw your ring away? He nodded. It was from a story that wasn't true, he said. Chloe considered this. Then she asked, can we get real food? This place doesn't have any. The mundane request broke the tension. Michael almost laughed. Yes, of course, anything you want. Pizza, Chloe said decisively. Normal pizza, not fancy pizza. It was a test, a small one. Could he be normal? Could he exist in their world, not just his? He ordered pizza from the kind of place that delivered to offices, not penthouses. They ate it on the floor because there was no dining table. It was awkward and quiet, but it was a shared meal. In the weeks that followed, Michael did not try to force a fairy tale. He used his resources quietly, practically. He found and paid for a renowned specialist to evaluate Sarah's years of chronic back pain from manual labor, a pain she'd simply accepted as part of life. He secured a modest, bright two-bedroom apartment in a good school district, with a year's lease paid from Chloe's trust, not from him. He showed up for appointments, but he listened more than he talked. He learned that Chloe loved astrophysics and hated mayonnaise. He learned that Sarah still drew beautiful sketches in a worn notebook. He also did the hard, private work. He dissolved his business partnership cleanly, buying out the partner who had conspired with Evelyn. He restructured his company to be less all-consuming, promoting a capable CEO to run daily operations. He began seeing a therapist, not because a court ordered it, but because he realized the man who abandoned his family was still living inside him, and he needed to evict him. The final surprise came not from Michael, but from the city itself. A local news outlet doing a feel-good piece on holiday charity had gotten a tip about a homeless woman returning a wallet full of cash. They tracked down Sarah with her permission for a brief interview. She was poised, dignified, and deflected praise. When asked why she did it, she said simply, because it was the right thing to do. My daughter was watching. The quote and her quiet grace went viral. But the surprise was the anonymous matching donation that flooded into the city's largest women's shelter the next day, $50,000. Michael had repaid the amount, but not to himself, to the world she lived in. He didn't put his name on it. It was her integrity that deserved the spotlight, not his guilt. 3 months after the day in the lobby, they were in the new apartment. Sarah's drawings were on the fridge. Chloe's homework was on the table. Michael was there, trying to help with algebra and failing miserably. Sarah watched them from the kitchen, a faint smile on her face. He was trying. He was imperfect, often clumsy, but he was present. The research on lost love reunions after long separations often cites a success rate of 72% when the reunion is built on a foundation of genuine history and honest reckoning. They weren't lovers rekindling a flame. They were co-conspirators building something entirely new from the rubble of the past, a family. Michael looked up from the confusing equations, caught Sarah watching, and offered a small, hopeful smile. She didn't smile back fully, but she didn't look away. The war was over. The work had begun. And for the first time in 15 years, the path forward for all of them was not a lonely one, but a shared journey, one tentative step at a time. The story of Sarah and Michael is more than a tale of lost love found. It is a stark map of the distance between two Americas, one of soaring glass towers, the other of silent, desperate struggle, and the fragile human bridge that can sometimes connect them. It asks us the most uncomfortable question: what do we owe to the people we leave behind in our climb to the top? Sarah Miller's act of honesty was not an anomaly. It was a testament to a truth often buried by stereotypes, that moral integrity is not a product of wealth, but of character. Studies across 40 nations confirm that people in poverty frequently return lost valuables, driven by a deep need to hold onto their self-respect. In a world that often reduces the poor to statistics, Sarah reminds us that every person on the street has a story, a history, a name. Her journey from homelessness to stability wasn't a magical rescue. It was the result of one man finally choosing to see her humanity and her own fierce resilience in accepting help without surrendering dignity. For Michael Thorne, the billionaire who had everything, the reunion was not a reward, but a reckoning. His redemption did not lie in writing a check, but in the harder currency of presence, of listening, of doing the unglamorous work of building trust day by day. He discovered that the miracles we need rarely arrive in majestic packages. They come disguised in quiet, simple moments: a returned wallet, a shared pizza, a math lesson, proving that no matter how far we stray, the chance to make things right is often waiting for us to simply look up from our own lives and meet the eyes of grace. Their story touches on a profound psychological reality. Research into lost love reunions shows that when former sweethearts reconnect after many years, the bonds can be powerful and lasting, but only if they are built on a foundation of honest confrontation with the past. Michael and Sarah were not picking up where they left off. They were starting over from a place of shattered trust, building something new from the rubble. Their success, still unfolding, hinges not on romance, but on the harder, more durable materials of accountability and forgiveness. So what does this mean for us? It means that the next time you pass someone in need, remember they are not a backdrop to your life. They are the protagonist of their own epic story, one that might intersect with yours in ways you cannot imagine. It means that the choices we make in our personal lives, the promises we keep or break, the people we honor or discard, echo across years and shape realities we may never see. And it means that redemption is not a prize for the perfect, but a possibility for the willing. Sarah's quiet dignity and Michael's difficult awakening show us that our greatest wealth is not in our bank accounts, but in our connections. Our greatest security is not in walls, but in bridges. And sometimes, the most extraordinary second chances begin with the simplest, most ordinary act of doing the right thing. If this story of hope and humanity resonated with you, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell for more real-life journeys that explore the heart of the human experience. Thank you for watching.